I have the great pleasure now of speaking with Dr. Carol Greider with Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and, of course, a Nobel Laureate. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about your advocacy in Washington, D.C. to try to get funding for research in science.
I mean, advocacy is really key. I've been got involved fairly early, dragged in at a young age to go down and talk about science to the Congress. I think I did one of the ASCB education of senators 15 years ago. So as the funding climate has changed over the years and what has come to now, it's very clear that just keeping up a constant discussion and educating the senators and other funding agencies is really what's key, because they have to understand what basic science means. And unless we go out there and explain to them what fundamental curiosity-driven science is, there won't be a voice for that in the Congress. So it's really important for everyone to be able to go out and talk about what it is that we do.
Were you surprised at how little people knew? Because it seems year after year the cuts just keep getting deeper.
It's a continual education process, and of course we live in our general society, and there are many different things going on in society in terms of funding priorities and different administrations. But what really counts is to just continue to get the story out there and to not necessarily be discouraged. But just because it didn't happen this one particular year doesn't mean it won't happen the next year or the next year. And it's really fundamental for people to get out there and talk about science.
And this is something I think that is a concern for many researchers, but I don't know that all of them are as involved as you are. And I think for people who say, okay, let someone else deal with that side of it, I'm going to do my work in the lab, I think they need the message of, you need to be inspired to join in this effort as well.
Every voice really counts, and that's one thing that the ASCB is really great about, is getting out that message of advocacy and going and do things, and they have hill trips, and people can get involved, and there are ways here at the meeting that they can understand how they can get involved in doing that advocacy, because it's actually rewarding to go and talk to senators and have them actually listen to what's going on.
I think your research, for which you were honored with the Nobel Prize, on the structure of telomeres is sort of a perfect example of all of this, because if you talk to anyone on the street or anyone in Washington, D.C., they would go, the what? But yet, this is something that has impact on everything from aging to cancer and the things that do strike a chord with the people that control the purse strings.
Yeah, it's a story that's fairly easily told. Everybody understands that cells have to divide, and if you have something that regulates how many times cells can divide, that's a concept that is fairly easy to get across. And so it's a nice story that one can have as a elevator speech, the importance of cells dividing, and if your cells can't divide, then you may have bone marrow failure or pulmonary fibrosis, and to link something as fundamental as the end of a chromosome to specific human diseases, and then to go back and say, we're not talking about just these specific human diseases, we're talking about understanding the fundamental mechanisms that occur in cells, and that's what gets us to the disease. So it's a nice case in point. So I'm very happy to be able to do that, and I'm just at Johns Hopkins, which is right down the road from Washington, D.C. So I make myself available, and the ASCB Public Policy Committee has certainly availed of that, and I'm happy to go and do that advocacy whenever I can.
Well, especially when you use diseases like a pulmonary fibrosis. If anyone who has been touched by that in their lives, they know they have lost someone because there is no cure.
Yes.
And I think that's when people really say, I need to do something about this.
And there's this tension about whether one wants to advocate for a particular disease or make the point that we wouldn't understand the fundamental thing that went wrong in that disease unless we really understood the basic biology of the cell. You have to, there's the analogy of a car. If your car is going along and something doesn't work and you don't know what a catalytic converter does, then you're not going to be able to fix that car. So we have to understand how the cell works in general to be able to understand what goes wrong in disease. And making that point with something as simple as the ends of chromosomes, I find is a nice tool to be able to relate to fundraisers and the public in general.
And we may not be able to talk about this in a very short time, but what is the status of that research now, and how active are you?
Oh, my lab is still very interested in understanding the fundamental mechanisms. We have collaborations with the clinical colleagues at Johns Hopkins who actually see patients that are dying of these telomere syndromes where they don't have enough telomere, and so the cells die. And my lab is really focused on the building blocks of what is it that establishes the telomere length equilibrium. What protein talks to what protein, how is it regulated, what are those processes, because we really believe that by understanding that regulatory basis, we'll be able to make changes that can then work toward treating the disease of these patients that are coming into the hospital that we also see. So there's that connection between the basic science and the clinical that really is a very powerful connection.
And the ability to affect change for so many people's lives. Dr. Greider, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.